Okay, Freddie, let's talk about the ballet Raymonda.
Right.
1946. It was Balanchine's last ballet for the Ballet Russe, as I understand it.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
And it's a ballet that we don't really know all that much about in the Ballet Russe version.
We didn't do it very often, and they managed to resurrect the last act, but the other two acts were out.
I see. Well, now I have a couple of photographs here that I would like to show you. And here's this rather divine caricature that was in the paper the week before the opening.
Well, my goodness me.
So can you tell us what's going on there?
Well, as you can see, I'm dressed in armor, but what has Danilva got on her head?
Oh,
this is the
this
most
is not the final
extraordinary
costume?
thing. No. Actually, you know, that was not Nicky.
Oh.
When he wasn't in it, he did what I did. This was Nikita Tallinn, actually, you know, there in that part. But it's, where did you find this?
Well, I found it in the Times the week of the opening, you know, when they were announcing this ballet to come.
Oh, and that's Alex Gard that did it.
Oh, yeah? I didn't know who that was.
There's a big book of Alex Gard caricatures like this.
Oh, well, funny.
Oh, dear.
Fun.
Quite dreadful.
Well, now, I have a few other photographs here, Fred Fell photographs, and I just wanted to put them on briefly because, in fact, the costumes are quite beautiful.
Yes, they were.
Quite
beautiful. They really were. Now, that's the first act.
Uh-huh.
And as you can see, I'm in the armor.
There you
this
are.
was the second act with the big, what they call the pas d'action going on there. And this, again, is the second act. That's the chardash in the last act.
Uh-huh.
And that's the pas de dix, as we knew it.
I see.
What has been named the pas hongroise, it's been called variations, I don't know. But that's there.
Many
that's
things,
many
yes,
things.
Well, it was obviously a major undertaking.
Yes, it was.
It's a 3-act ballet.
It was, and at that time, I think we were the first. I don't think anybody else had attempted a 3-act ballet.
In America,
the Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo, I think. I can't. No, I think we really were, and it was a strange thing because actually we had done 3 acts of Coppelia, but then we came with it here. That was not done here, but this was done in America.
Yeah.
And as it happened with Coppelia, we had to try and put. They were not used to 3-act ballets in those days.
Yeah.
And in Coppelia, we had to put Gaieté Parisienne at the end. They just will not go with one thing.
Because they thought it was too short?
No, they thought, well, we're only getting one ballet.
That's what I mean,
That's
too short for the program.
I mean, this is what it was.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but this one was not quite that way. But even so, they were not ready for it.
Yeah.
They weren't. And you know, there was a lot, in the first act, there's a lot of wonderful dancing for the corps de ballet.
Really?
Lots of lovely things. People like Paddy Wilde and all the Maria, they were all in it.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, you once said it had the advantage of not only being a beautiful showcase for Madame Danilova, but it also got everybody on the stage.
Oh, everybody was there. And it's in the second act with Marie-Jeanne, she was Léon Danilian, and Nick, I mean, hordes were on the stage, it seemed to us in those days.
Yeah.
And it was quite something. And, you know, and with all that wonderful music, the score is so great.
Well, it is.
It's
and
so
of course, Mr.
lovely.
Balanchine used it for several subsequent ballets.
Right, exactly.
So he loved the
Yes.
melodiousness.
Yes.
But I have to say, looking in the newspapers, it did not get exactly rave reviews.
No.
You did, but the ballet as a whole was considered, despite the melodious score, to be kind of a bore.
Yes.
I believe. Is that more or less correct?
Well, the thing was, yes, it was. I mean, the actual story, when you think about it, the most wonderful thing that happened in the first act was there was a big fireplace and a large mantel shelf, and there was a sort of nun-like figure on it there, you know, and the curtain went up, and there it was, and the dancing took place. And then when I go off to war, then Shora goes, and she prays to this figure, and it started to move. And the audience were going, you could hear the gasps and the oohs and the ahs. She was wonderful. One girl, and Mr. B said, no, you know, you're going to have to stand. There was auditions. She got it, this girl. She got in, and suddenly it all opened up. Well, the audience was absolutely...
Because she'd been still as a statue
absolutely,
for minutes, yeah.
Well, that sort of helped the first act,
yes.
I must say. That was great. That really was. And then the second act, there was the dancing of the girls, and then they were invaded by the hordes. And the hordes came in and danced, and they wanted to abduct, you know, the girl, Raymonda. And then I came on with a sword, and we had a fight, and the curtain came down, and that was that act. And then the last act was a lot of dancing, and the thing was, you know, as you can see, I'm in this armor all the way through the first two acts, and then it came to the last act, and I thought, well, now what will I be doing here? And Shura said, no, friend, you will dance with one of the four boys. And I said, what? And she said, you will be like Vladimir, they all dance in Russia. I said, sure, we're not in Russia. And I'm certainly not dancing one of the four boys when I've stood all night in this outfit. I said, no. And I just said, no, I wouldn't do that. I'd never in my life said anything like this to anyone before. But I thought, no. So I went to Mr. B. Mr. B said, you know, don't worry, I do solo for you. And that's what we've done today. And that's much to the chagrin of Madame Danilova, I must admit. But it was all right. But that's what we did today. And that's how I learned this solo, and that's how it was. And then there was a lovely coda, with all of us going mad again, you know. And that part of the ballet, all of the last act, there was a chadash, a pas de trois, all of the pas de dix, with all of the solos for the girls, and for Shura and myself, and then a big coda for everybody.
Yes.
And it came down, and that was the good part of Raymonda.
Yeah.
And they saved all of that, and we did it on the road as a ballet.
That was the general impression I got from reading about it, was that in fact the last act was...
that was the nice part of it.
So tell me about how this solo was in fact created. It was because you...
Well, I was so agitated, and you see, then of course what happens, this is really something. All of this is done, and then I hurt my back, and I don't do the opening performance.
Right.
So
you're not on the opening night cast?
I'm not on the, no, I'm not there at all. Nicky was on, but Nicky was one of the boys. Then the thing came about, well, they said, if you want to do a solo, what are you going to wear? I said, don't worry. I had a costume made, it was my own, and I was all ready to talk about waiting in the wings.
Because you weren't about to do your solo in the armor.
No, absolutely no. So I had all my own costume made, and I was ready to go on. And he spent some time, you know, with me doing this. But the thing was, you know that opening step, this big.
What is that? Yeah, now, is that
now,
a renversé, or what would you
it's
call
a fouetté renversé sort, right?
Yeah.
That step, when I was 14 years old, studying in England, was part of the syllabus that we had to go through, part of an exam that we had to pass on.
Yes.
Because when I did it, Mr. Balanchine said to me, he said, Fred, well, you don't have any trouble with this. And I said, well, no, because I've been doing it since I was a little boy.
Oh, crazy.
And he said, you know, well, where? I said, in England. This is part of the...
he must have been quite happy to hear that.
Well, he was.
And to see that.
And I had no problem. As Nicholas said, you know, it's the coordination.
Sure.
To get the arms and the head and the legs moving at the right time, then the stick comes out.
And then 4 times in a row.
And then 4 times in a row.
That's what makes it really hard.
So, but that part of it, and then of course he went on to elaborate and do this and we'll do that. And
so what we're getting as the solo was really not in the original
No,
sort
it
of
wasn't
plan.
at all. And then he found this music, which, you know, since he's used a great deal. So
well, yeah, when they did Pas de Dix,
Andre
used that music, and there are 1 or 2 steps that are the same. Well, now, what is the hardest part of that solo?
Well, I think to come on the stage and get through that first thing.
Yeah.
That's all right, but as it progresses, it gets more difficult. This thing from the diagonal with the batterie and this, that's not easy.
That sort of side cabriole thing,
yes,
isn't
this
that
thing. And then to do all of this, and he made me do, I had to do all this batterie, all of it. And coming at the end, and you know, when you haven't done anything in a ballet.
Yes, and then
I come out just before the curtain comes down at 10 o'clock at night, and you have to do this. It's not so good. So it's sort of warming up all the way in the armor, warming up all the time.
And so you took the wig off in the last act.
Oh, yes,
also,
I
right?
had the wig off. Oh, I had to get rid of it all. Yes, I couldn't.
Well, now, you were talking earlier about the difference between perhaps this solo, this style of a male variation, as compared to some things that are being danced today.
Yes. These days, people move around the stage much more than we ever did. I mean, when have you seen anybody lately finish a variation with 16 intricacies?
Yeah.
It doesn't happen anymore. And they will finish with a great big something, as I say, the steps that have no names,
Right,
that
yes,
I call them.
yes.
And, you know, that's the kind of dancing men do today. We were up and down, as you can see in this variation. But it's over I suppose it's, I don't know whether the stages are bigger,
Yeah.
but I think the technique has changed, and I
Sure.
think the Russians have got a lot to do with it. I think what they brought with their, and I was talking with Danilova about this, and she said, you know, Frederic, it is because they dance on enormous areas
Yeah.
and stages, the movements have to go with the size of the stage and the space that they have to travel.
Right.
So consequently, steps are made to look differently because they have to move. Otherwise, they'd be in one place going up and down, rather like, you know, an automaton. So she said it was that really
Perhaps,
the
yeah,
Russians
when
brought.
they came in the 50s.
And they had terrible trouble that they all met. It wasn't big enough.
Oh, I imagine.
They was just
yes.
they got on and they ran out of space immediately.
You're right.
They just they weren't used to it, you know.
Now, did Balanchine mention Petit Pas while he was creating this Raymonda?
A lot of it, yes. A lot of the, and I don't know, but I have an idea that whatever he remembered and whatever Shura remembered, a lot of it was put in.
Went into it. That's what
Yes.
they said later, you know.
I
That's
think-
sort of the received opinion.
I know Shura the solos, because
Yeah.
the solos are very different.
Yeah.
They're very, very different.
Oh.
And she did remember them, and they
Really?
came out,
Yeah.
and we all looked. I thought, they are weird. They're strange.
Oh,
They are different.
wouldn't we like to have those now?
But the thing is, coming at that time,
Yeah.
and after having seen Swan Lake and Sleeping Beauty, with the kind of variation that they all had in those ballets, these were entirely, completely different.
Really?
Completely different.
Well, I have to say, I saw Nureyev's Raymonda with ABT some years ago, and there were long, boring stretches. So I think it's inherent in the full-length ballet.
Yes.
The action just does not...
No, it never has been.
Yeah.
A big ballet like, I don't think you can mention it in the classics like Beauty and Swan
No.
Lake, you can't, because it's not good enough.
Yeah, yeah.
Even though Mr. B did say it had a sort of success in Russia, not a very big one.
Yes.
But I think Shura was intrigued with the idea because it's her,
Yeah.
you know, all the way through.
Well, now let's talk a little bit about your years with Balanchine in the Ballet Russe. He first worked extensively with you in Song of Norway, is that correct?
Yes.
Although he had been there a little earlier staging Serenade and Baiser, is that right?
Balanchine came to us in 1940.
Uh-huh.
And he came and he insisted that Marie-Jeanne come with him.
Yeah.
She did the lead
In-
Serenades, and George Zorich was supposed to have done the waltz part with Yuskevich, but Zorich was out, and he said, I'll take that young English boy. So the young English boy, I was in it there.
That
I
was
did.
already unusual to have a young English boy. in
Well,
the
there you
company,
go.
no?
That was it. So
I think
I
those
did it,
Russians,
and then we
yeah.
got along well. Then the next thing, he came back and did Jeu de Cartes,
Aha, yes.
and then I was I did the Joker there, but then he had Bill Dollar come in
Oh, yes.
to help with the choreography because he was a bit shaky about it. And of course there was Danilova and Markova and Krasovska and in the cast with Igor and Yuskevich and Iglevsky and me. So it was a wonderful cast. And as we were working with that, I think he asked me to come down and learn the girls' variations. And I sort of said, well, all right. And I didn't know quite what it was all about, but I did. And Shura one day said, no, she said, Frederic, what you are doing here? I said, I'm learning your variation. Oh, she said, very good. And then the next thing, when it's all over and it's all done, and he went to the management and he said, I want Freddie to rehearse my ballet. Oh, they said, no way. He's not Russian and he's too young and this, that, and the other. So Mr. B said, well, I'll take the ballet away if he doesn't rehearse it. And that really started me off on another line. I never
Yes.
realized it at the time.
Sure.
But that's what happened. Then the next time he came back, oh no, I'm sorry, he came back in 1940, he did Baiser.
Aha.
Baiser de la Fée. He did Serenade, then Baiser, then came and did Jeu de Cartes, and then the next thing, it's Song of Norway,
Right.
which David Lechine should have done the choreography.
Oh,
But
that's a story I know.
Mr. Denham said, first of all, they'd engaged me, Wright and Forrest, who were doing the music. And there was a number called Freddie and His Fiddle. So they knew me from the ballet, and they called me and said, would I like to be in the show? I said, well, yes. And it was in the summer. So I was the first one in. And then when I went away for a holiday, I came back to find there were 10 dancers, and Shura and Krasowska and Leon. We were all in the show. And he was he was doing the dancing, and Mr. Denham had said, if you want the Ballet de Monte Carlo, you have to have Balanchine. And Mr. B was out of a job. He had nothing.
Yeah.
It was a sad time for him.
Yes, yes.
Very sad. And we resurrected Mr. B, because he came and did Norway, and when the rehearsals were going on, we suddenly started Dance Concertant.
Yes.
For the season, we were going to dance at the city centre in the September. So that was going on at the same time Norway. Now, Norway was a big success in Los Angeles. It moved to San Francisco. We still rehearsed. And then we all moved to Broadway. We were on Broadway.
Yes.
The Ballet de Monte Carlo with all of us there. Alas, only for 2 weeks.
Oh.
And then we had to go up and do our performances at City Centre. And then they had to have, in our place, they had to have ex-Ballet Russe dancers and principals that had been in the Ballet Russe to do our parts, Shura and mine and the others. And that's how it all worked. Then he stayed. He stayed with us. That was the first thing, Dance Concertant. The next thing was Bourgeois Gentilhomme. And then after that, we did Ballet Imperial. And along the way, we came to Sonnambula.
Yes.
And then Mozartiana came into the, you know, we had marvelous things of his.
Just gems. Well, what I'm interested in is what kind of reputation did Balanchine have in 1944, say, when you began to work with him?
Well,
on a more regular basis.
On a more regular, you know, actually, he'd done the movies.
Yeah.
He'd done Broadway, and his life suddenly came to us. There was nowhere for him to go. It was a dead end.
Really?
There was nothing.
Yeah.
Until we were there, and then, you know, Mr. Denham said, you know, if you'll do Norway. And then Mr. B said, well, all right, maybe I'll do a couple of ballets. And that's what it was.
It is amazing.
And that's how it was all resurrected again.
Yeah.
And there was talk of doing Prodigal.
Oh.
Yes, there was.
Yes.
And he said, you know, he looked at me and he blinked, you'd be a good Prodigal, and all that was going on. And then he said, no, it's not good enough.
Oh.
And he never wanted to do it. It's been a strange thing with him, because one of his early, you know, the big successes. And, but Ballet Imperial was revived. He'd already done that Serenade. He'd done Mozartiana. He'd done Sonnambula. He hadn't. That has not been done, and that was a creation.
Right.
That was a real creation.
Let's talk about that ballet, because that was again a case of you created the role, but in fact you didn't dance the opening night.
I didn't do the opening night. No. I again, with the back, I went out. Well, all the tours and many Swan Lakes and thousands of Katy Parisians, no wonder. Anyway, but that it was made, and of course we rehearsed that on the road. We didn't have luxury studios to rehearse in and things.
Like this.
We rehearsed, get off the train and go to the rehearsal room and start with the show at night. So that's how all that came about. And then there was, there was quite a scene. There were 3 parts. There was the coquette, there was the sonnambula, streetwalker, and of course the poet. Well, it came about that I was there when Mr. B said, now, sure, you'll do the sleepwalker. Oh, Josh, she said, no, I will do the coquette. You know, already she's in the part, she's doing it. It's already there.
The eternal coquette,
yes. So he says, no, and he snipped a bit, and he says, no, sure, it's not, you know, no, you will do with the candle, and you will do this. And, oh, she was very. Then she heard Maria was going to do it. Oh dear, there was more problems. But it all worked itself out. But that was the beginning. That's how it was. But then when she realized the kind of part she was going to do, you know, what it entailed, you know, and then and the tango, that's a very difficult dance.
Now, you mentioned that to me. That's the duet between the coquette and the poet.
Poet, right.
Now, I was interested that you mentioned it because, of course, most people think of the sleepwalker and the poet, and that's kind of the high point. But you had a special interest in this.
It was the guests are at the ball, and one by one they leave, and we're alone. And then this takes. There was And it was purposely done that way. You know, he wanted it that. He wanted something, a focal point in the middle of the ballet, not only for the coquette, but for the poet. Because at the end of all that session, he's left.
Yes.
And then, you know, he sees the light. But that was all carefully worked out.
Yeah.
It really was, you know.
But now you talked about that duet as a lot of use of shoulders, for instance.
And
what about that
the
interested you so?
And we used to call it the tango because it had lots of tango things in it. And she's upside down and she's brought up. Very, hardly any lifts. In fact, little things off the floor, but no great things.
Yeah.
It was all, which was again, a different kind of, it was a ballroom sort of dance.
Yes.
It was.
Yes.
You know,
Amazing.
it was, so that was very, very interesting for all of us, and it was tough.
What kind of coaching did he give you as the poet?
Very little. He
Really?
said to me, he just said, now, he said, Fred, walk on and forget everything. So I walked on. I forgot everything until I saw until I saw her down there, and then I did. And it's the longest introduction in ballet, where the baron comes, the poet goes. It's this, and he goes away, and down there I saw her. But that was again because we were all wondering, you know.
You mean wondering
What's going to happen? And then we had that funny step in the big ballroom. We were all going around on the floor.
Oh, yes.
Well, now we're in San Francisco. It's a very cold morning in a cold theater. And Mr. B suddenly gets and does yum, did a little dum, and we all roared with laughter.
Imagine.
And he said, you may laugh, but that's the step. Well, we couldn't believe it. We just couldn't believe it. And we're all prancing around doing this on the floor.
Yeah.
But he said, no, that's it.
Well, that's still there.
That's still there. Oh, that's a key step.
I think so. Now, what about this tunnel of death, or whatever that is called? Or did you have anything called that? You know, when they all go through.
Oh, yes, we had that.
Yes, yes.
Yes, that was also in a big polonaise.
Yeah.
And that was a device again. You know, what can you do with polonaises? But he was a master at polonaise.
Yes.
I just saw the one at
Theme and Variations.
Variations.
Is magnificent.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, this was under and through and around, and it always part of a building up towards the final thing when the baron says, come in, we've got all the food and drink. And then he whisks her away from me and I'm left. But all that built up to that big exit.
Yeah.
That all that music, and then suddenly the tunnel, I've never heard that. That's something
Well,
new.
I think people weren't quite sure what was the meaning of this particular.
No, it was just, I'd never heard of it, but we just all had to run under and get there quickly because of the music.
Yeah.
As always, very fast. You know, the boys took me around, had me up high, and then he said, boys, wait a minute, and he called Shura. He said, now, Shura, you will take Freddie off. No, she said, how? So the boys got me up, and they lowered me onto her, and her arms are this way, and she still has the wretched candle here. So they lowered me in, and I put my arm right around her neck here, and grabbed her and got myself in a ball like this. I said, Shura, no, Frederic, not bad. And she walked and she carried me off. And that was it.
Yeah. Well, it's a coup de foudre. I mean,
it was a coup de foudre, but the way, and it was the way the boys placed me in her arms.
Yes.
She could never have done this.
No,
never.
of course
but
not.
from on high, and then coming in here, and then my getting very tight.
And just for a minute, yeah.
And then she had to turn and walk off. And it was quite a walk.
Yeah.
And she never failed. She didn't get nearer the wings. She stayed where she was supposed to, so they could all see her.
Yeah. Now tell me, when Danse Concertante came about, which is a non-character part to a very rather difficult, I would say, Stravinsky score.
Yes,
How did this hit you all at the time?
Well, I will tell you, particularly when we started with the Pas de Deux, it was hopeless. I mean, we were put into these positions and angles, and it was quite alarming because we'd never done anything quite like this.
Well, I thought not, yeah.
Something to the effect that Shura said to me, I said, Shura, we look awful. No, we go to the mirror. And we did. We looked awful doing all these, and we had to find ways to make it look right, because he'd done it purposely that way.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be something very beautiful. But the beginning, it was something, and then all the trios and all the music was so different. And the trio that Maria and Nikki and I think it was Mary Ellen
yes.
had, that was so jazzy.
Yeah.
And it was a wonderful jazzy thing. And I remember they were on and rehearsals, and he's standing there, and I said, Mr. B, can I run out there, do a pirouette, a tour en l'air, fit down to the knee and run off? He said, yes, go do it. And I did. I'm right in the middle of everything.
Step.
My own step.
Yes.
I went in, and it was da-da-da, a pirouette and jump and something, and I flew off. And the three of them would say, what's this in the middle of the stage here?
About Danse Concertante, I was quite interested in how you felt in not portraying a character. In other words, a sort of an acting part or a person. Or,
yes.
I mean, you're yourself, you're a dancer. Was that a big departure for you?
Well, no, let me just say one thing. When we did Serenade,
yes.
that was it.
That was the
I
beginning.
Had never, that was the very beginning. I had never been on the stage as nothing.
Right,
As
nothing but
always
yourself.
Nothing but me.
Yes,
And
yes.
I went to the dressing room, I'm just waltzed around the stage and have a lovely time. But I'd never, you know, and we were so used to Myasin and Nijinsky, we were always something.
Parts and
We
yes.
were a theme or
Storms
something, but we were
themes,
something.
fates or
We were always
something.
were that, exactly.
And you did rodeo and you
And
did all these
that
things
stuff.
with actual parts, yes.
Parts,
Yeah.
and then coming to Danse Concertante. But the thing was that finally the movement was so interesting and it was so inventive. That took place of any kind of portrayal that one might have expected.
You get absorbed by it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then enjoy
Yeah.
just for that.
Yes.
For that real reason. I mean, even when you think of Mozart, there was something in Mozart that was, there was
A feeling.
a feeling
yeah.
of great joy and happiness, and then the lovely pas de deux,
Yes.
which is very sad, but with Danse Concertante, it was punch, out, do it,
Yeah. Yeah.
and have a good time. That's what it was.
Now, I promised to ask you about your role in selecting the costumes for Danse Concertante.
For Danse Concertante. Now, there was Eugene Berman
Because the costumes are gorgeous.
and Mr. Stravinsky, Mr. Denham, the director, and of course, Mr. B. So one day they were all arguing about this, and all in Russian, of course, all of them Russian, and all going mad. So finally, she said, no. He said, Frederic, we're going over to Mr. Stravinsky's house in Hollywood. So I said, all right. So we went over to the house, and the 4 Russians and me were there. Danse Concertante. They have to decide on the colors. So Mr. Berman throws a piece of black velvet on the table, and they throw colors, pellets like this. And then they said, Mr. B said, Freddie, pick out the colors. I said, what? And the Russians they said, pick them out. And I picked out all of those colors that went on in Danse Concertante.
Because they're so beautiful, they're so lively, and in a way, they don't match the rest.
No,
I mean,
they
they're
don't.
the most lively thing in it.
And I looked at what I'd chosen, and I thought, they'll throw this right out. But no, they were kept. They were all there. So that was, that was the sort of coup, as far as I was concerned.
Now, were you in Barocco or Imperial or?
No, I was, again, in Ballet Imperial, no.
Yeah.
Nikki did that with Miss Mary Ellen.
Yes.
No, I had, my cart was full.
Oh, I'm sure it was. I just
and
wondered.
one more, no.
And what did people think of Barocco, for instance?
Well,
I mean, that's...
First of all, it was very, at that time, you see, Mr. B was up against a lot of criticism from the press. And they used to call, underneath the arches, London bridges falling down, all of that was going on. So when he came to do Concerto Barocco, we looked and thought, well, it all goes with the music, but what is it all about? We were all stunned. We'd never seen anything like this, as stark, and that's what it is. Movement, for movement's sake, that's all it was. And we looked, but when we came to the girls doing bum, 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 oh dear, those poor ladies. I mean, it was shock after shock with that one. And the poor man with, this Concerto Barocco and then thank you very much, don't bother, don't come back. I mean, it's something, it really is.
Well, I think people don't always realize that the Ballet Russe was quite a pioneering company in those days.
Where?
Because these types of ballets simply had not been seen.
No, they hadn't. No, they hadn't at all.
And
we, you know, Mr. B, fortunately, he thought there were good enough dancers in the company to do these.
Something like that, yes.
You know, because after all, they're
conclusion.
just not little things you throw on.
No.
And he was very, very happy with the company in those days. We were saddened so when we heard about the Ballet Society and leaving. Oh dear, this was, and we were, you know, we were rudderless then. We were off, and then by that time I was in it, doing the premiere dancer and staging the ballets and doing the rehearsals, doing everything by that time.
So when Balanchine asked you to join Ballet Society,
yes. Oh,
you've decided not to.
I couldn't have done it.
Because you were just...
I was the mainstay.
Too much of a...
It was Anton Dolin that said I was the inner motor of the Ballet Russe. Well, it's the first time I'd been looked at as a motor.
You were the inner motor, and Shura was the elaboration.
She was something like that.
The two of you, I know.
Right.
And I guess there was also the fact that Ballet Society was only dancing about 4 times a year.
That's
so
right.
it would have meant a big switch in your career.
No, and he did say, he really said, you know, Fred, I'm sure you could do, I will show you how to do choreography in this. He was really, well, we were very close at that time, you know, and after all, he had thrown me into this position. It was during my birthday that I found I was to be the maître de ballet of the Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo in the opening night of Song of Norway. And
so it didn't take him long to figure out that you had a talent for that.
No.
That was what amazing about Balanchine. He found the people, one was a teacher, one was a rehearsal person.
And that's what it was. And it was made, it was announced, that's the famous, Shura came to me, Danim, she says, no, Frederic, does it mean you are going to be my boss? I said, yes, I'm going to be your boss. So there we are, that was that one. Oh dear.
But it wasn't the very end of your association with Mr. B, because you did stage Ballet Imperial for the New York City Ballet.
I did Ballet Imperial for the New York City Ballet. They were up on
82nd?
82nd, and Schraft was below.
Oh, yes.
And I had gone to take Madame Danilova and Madame Dubrovska to lunch. And we were all dressed up. Mr. B walked into the studio and he said, Freddie, what do you remember about Ballet Imperial? And I said, everything. He said, wait a minute. So he went out, he got a pianist, and the 2 ladies are furious, waiting for the lunch. I went through all of Ballet Imperial for him, and he said, right, you go down on Monday, go to the theatre. They just moved in here. Go down to the theatre and start rehearsing with the company. He told me that Suzanne would be doing it, and maybe her first big thing. And then the next thing was I had to, there were friends of New York City Ballet, and it was in the theatre, and I had to go out and explain all about it. Well, I thought, well, here we are. And one of Mr. Balanchine's most classical works, and again, I rose to the occasion, and it was fine.